Let me start with a question that might feel a little uncomfortable, but I promise it's one that matters deeply to your health and your peace of mind. Have you ever found yourself wondering whether masturbation could be connected to depression or anxiety? Maybe you've read articles online, heard myths from friends, or just noticed changes in how you feel after the act, and you're left asking yourself, could this be harming my mental health? If that's you, then you're in exactly the right place. I want you to know something very important before we go any further. You are not alone in asking this question. Millions of people across the world think about this at some point in their lives, but very few ever get honest, compassionate, and scientifically grounded answers. That's why I'm here today. My goal is to speak to you not just as a professional, but as someone who truly cares about your mental and emotional well-being. So let me ask you right now, have you ever felt guilty or anxious after masturbating? Or maybe you've gone through times when you questioned whether it was making your depression worse? If you can relate, I want you to pause this video for a second and share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who might read your story and feel a little less alone because of it. Now, here's what I want to do with you today. I want us to take this topic seriously with honesty and compassion, but also without judgment. Masturbation is one of the most misunderstood behaviors in human health. Some people grow up believing it's dangerous, shameful, or even sinful. Others hear the opposite, that it's perfectly healthy and harmless no matter what. But the truth, as with many things in life, is more nuanced. And when we talk about depression and anxiety, that nuance becomes incredibly important. Let's start with the facts. From a biological perspective, masturbation is a natural behavior. Nearly every culture in the world has recorded it, and research shows that most men and women engage in it at some point in their lives. When you orgasm, your brain releases a mix of chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, that can temporarily boost your mood and help relieve stress. On the surface, that sounds like a good thing, right? And for many people, it is. But the story doesn't end there. Here's where things get tricky. The connection between masturbation and mental health is not always about the act itself. Instead, it often depends on how you feel about it, how often you do it, and what role it plays in your life. For some, masturbation is a healthy release, a way to relax, to reduce tension, and even to help sleep better. But for others, it can become entangled with guilt, shame, or compulsive patterns that actually make depression and anxiety worse. Think about it like this. If you've been taught to believe that masturbation is bad or dirty, then even after the temporary mood boost, you might experience guilt or self-criticism. That guilt doesn't come from biology. It comes from conditioning, from beliefs passed down through family, culture, or religion. And guilt, over time, is one of the emotions that can feed depression and anxiety. I want to pause here and make something very clear. Masturbation itself does not directly cause depression or anxiety in the sense that smoking causes lung disease. The research does not show a direct, universal link where everyone who masturbates becomes depressed. Instead, the relationship is far more personal. For some, masturbation has no negative effects on mood at all. For others, especially if it becomes compulsive or tied to unhealthy thought patterns, it can absolutely contribute to feelings of sadness, low motivation, or heightened anxiety. Now let's talk about compulsion, because this is where many people struggle. When masturbation shifts from being a choice to feeling like an uncontrollable urge, it can start to interfere with your daily life. You might find yourself doing it when you don't really want to, or using it as a way to escape from uncomfortable emotions instead of addressing them directly. In these situations, masturbation can become like any other coping mechanism that's used excessively. Whether it's overeating, scrolling endlessly on social media, or drinking too much alcohol. It doesn't mean the behavior is inherently evil. It means it's being used in a way that might not support your long-term well-being. So let me ask you another question. Have you ever felt like you were using masturbation as a way to avoid facing stress, loneliness, or painful emotions? If so, you're not alone. And admitting that to yourself is not a weakness. It's actually a powerful step toward understanding your own mental health. There's another piece to this puzzle I want to bring up: pornography. Many people don't just masturbate in isolation, they use pornography as part of the experience. And research shows that heavy or compulsive use of pornography can sometimes be linked with higher levels of anxiety, social isolation, or even depressive symptoms. Again, this isn't true for everyone, but for some, the combination of pornography and masturbation creates unrealistic expectations, distorted self-image, or shame that feeds directly into mental health struggles. But here's the encouraging news I want to share with you. You are not stuck. No matter what your current relationship with masturbation looks like, you have the ability to change it. You can learn to use it in a way that supports your mental health rather than undermines it. Or if you feel it's becoming a problem, you can take steps to regain balance and control. One of the most important steps is self-awareness. Simply asking yourself, why am I doing this right now, can make a huge difference. Am I doing this because I want to relax? Because I'm lonely? Because I feel bored or anxious? By becoming more aware of your triggers, you start to understand the role that masturbation plays in your emotional life, and that understanding is the first step toward making conscious choices rather than automatic ones. Another key step is addressing the shame or guilt that might surround the behavior. Shame is a powerful emotion. It makes us want to hide, to stay silent, and to believe we're broken. But shame thrives in secrecy, and the truth is, you are not broken. You are human. The fact that you even care enough to ask these questions shows your strength and your desire for growth. I want you to remember this. Depression and anxiety are complex conditions. They are influenced by many factors: genetics, environment, relationships, lifestyle, and yes, sometimes even sexual habits. But masturbation alone is rarely the sole cause. More often, it's one piece of a much bigger puzzle. And when you start addressing the whole picture, your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, your thought patterns, your support systems, you'll notice that your mental health improves in ways that go far beyond this one behavior. Now, some of you might be listening and thinking, but I do feel worse after masturbating. I feel drained, unmotivated, or sad. If that's you, I want to validate your experience. Just because the science says there's no universal link doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. They are real. And they matter. What you're experiencing could be tied to guilt, to your personal beliefs, or even to a cycle of dopamine highs and lows that your brain is going through. It's worth paying attention to. Here's something practical you can try. For the next week, I want you to track how you feel before and after masturbation. Write down your emotions, your energy levels, your thoughts. Do you feel relaxed afterward, or do you feel guilty? Do you wake up the next morning feeling refreshed or sluggish? This simple practice can help you spot patterns that you might otherwise miss. If you discover that masturbation consistently leaves you feeling worse, then you might decide to reduce the frequency, change the circumstances, or even take a break for a while. On the other hand, if you find that it doesn't negatively affect you, then you can release some of that unnecessary guilt and give yourself permission to see it as a normal part of life. The key is not to blindly accept what others tell you, whether it's masturbation is evil or masturbation is always good. The key is to understand how it affects you, personally, and to make choices that align with your mental health and your values. Another layer I want to explore with you is how we sometimes use masturbation as a way to regulate emotions. I want you to think about your own life for a moment. When you're stressed, lonely, or feeling overwhelmed, what's your first instinct? For some, it's eating comfort food. For others, it's binge watching shows or scrolling through social media. And for many, it's sexual release. None of these things are inherently wrong. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, are these habits helping me cope in a healthy way? Or are they keeping me stuck in the same cycle of depression or anxiety? For example, let's say you've had a rough day at work, and instead of addressing the stress, like by talking it out, exercising, or finding a healthy outlet, you immediately turn to masturbation. In the moment, you might feel relief, but afterward, If guilt sets in, or if you realize you're avoiding the deeper issues, the anxiety doesn't actually go away. In fact, it may quietly build. Over time, this pattern can reinforce depression and anxiety instead of healing them. I want to emphasize something important here. Masturbation does not equal addiction by default. There's a difference between a normal, healthy habit and a compulsive behavior that feels out of control. The difference usually comes down to choice. If you can choose to masturbate when you want to, and also choose not to when it doesn't feel right, then you likely have a healthy relationship with it. But if you find yourself doing it even when you promised yourself you wouldn't, or if it's interfering with your relationships, work, or personal goals, then it's worth taking a closer look. So let me ask you this directly. Do you feel in control of your sexual habits, or do you sometimes feel like they control you? Be honest with yourself here, because that honesty is the foundation for change. If you want, share your answer in the comments. Sometimes just putting your truth into words can be incredibly freeing. Now let's talk about the emotional roller coaster that some people describe after masturbation. There's a term that's been used to explain this: post-nut clarity. For some, this simply means feeling a little more rational or detached after sexual release. But for others, it can mean sadness, regret, or anxiety that sets in almost immediately. If this happens to you, I want you to understand that it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It might just be your body and brain adjusting to the sudden drop in dopamine and oxytocin after orgasm. Think of it like coming down from a sugar rush. Your brain feels the high, and then it feels the dip. The good news is that this emotional crash isn't permanent, and there are ways to soften it. One way is to focus on your overall mental health habits, things like getting consistent sleep, eating nutrient-rich foods, exercising, and practicing mindfulness. These things stabilize your brain chemistry so that the highs and lows of sexual release don't feel so dramatic. Another powerful approach is reframing your mindset. Instead of beating yourself up for masturbating, try practicing self-compassion. Tell yourself, I made a choice and I'm human. This doesn't define me. That shift in how you talk to yourself can make a huge difference in how you feel afterward. I also want to address cultural and religious beliefs, because they play a massive role in how we interpret masturbation. Many people were raised in environments where it was labeled as a sin, a weakness, or a moral failure. If you grew up hearing those messages, it's no surprise that guilt or anxiety might surface after you masturbate. But here's what I want you to ask yourself. Are those beliefs truly yours, or are they simply voices you inherited from others? Sometimes, depression and anxiety aren't coming from the act itself, but from the weight of carrying beliefs that no longer serve you. This doesn't mean you should abandon your values or beliefs. What it means is that you should explore them with curiosity rather than fear. If your faith or personal convictions lead you to want to reduce or avoid masturbation, that's completely valid. But if guilt is crushing you simply because of what others told you, then it may be time to rethink whether that guilt is helping you live a healthy, meaningful life. Here's something practical I often recommend to people. Instead of focusing on eliminating the behavior right away, focus on understanding the emotions around it. Keep a simple journal where you write down what you feel before, during, and after. Over time, you'll start to see whether the anxiety or depression is really tied to the behavior itself, or if it's tied to your thoughts about it. That difference is crucial because you can challenge your thoughts in a way that you can't always control your impulses in the short term. Now, let's shift gears and talk about how to build a healthier relationship with yourself, because at the heart of this entire conversation is self-respect and self-compassion. Whether you masturbate once a week, once a day, or not at all, the real question is, how do you treat yourself afterward? Do you shame yourself, or do you show kindness? Depression and anxiety feed on self-criticism, but they weaken when we choose to treat ourselves with the same compassion we'd offer a close friend. Imagine if your best friend came to you and said, I feel depressed because I masturbated. Would you yell at them? Would you tell them they're a failure? Of course not. You'd comfort them. You'd remind them that they're human. So why not extend that same kindness to yourself? Another factor worth mentioning is how isolation can intensify both masturbation habits and mental health struggles. When we're lonely, we naturally look for comfort and connection. Sometimes masturbation fills that gap temporarily, but it doesn't address the root need for human connection. If you notice that you're masturbating more when you feel isolated, that's a sign to prioritize relationships, community, and connection in your life. Reaching out to a friend, joining a group, or simply talking to someone you trust can reduce both the urge and the depression that often follows. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak for struggling with this. You are not broken. Depression and anxiety are challenges that many people face, and masturbation is just one piece of a larger story. What matters most is not whether you do it or don't do it, but how you care for yourself and how you create balance in your life. Here's a simple exercise I want you to try. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the version of yourself who is mentally strong, emotionally balanced, and at peace. How does that version of you handle stress? How does that version of you relate to masturbation? Maybe they use it occasionally as a healthy release. Maybe they don't feel the need for it at all. The point isn't to force yourself into a mold. The point is to see that a balanced, healthy version of you is possible, and you can take steps today to move toward it. Let's talk about those steps. One of the most effective ways to reduce depression and anxiety connected to masturbation is to build new coping skills. For example, instead of turning to sexual release every time you feel stressed, try mindfulness meditation, deep breathing, or even a short workout. At first, it might feel difficult, but over time, your brain will start to associate relief and calm with these new habits rather than relying only on masturbation. Exercise in particular is incredibly powerful. When you move your body, you release endorphins, the same chemicals that make you feel good during orgasm. But unlike the quick high and crash cycle, exercise builds a more stable foundation for your mood. So the next time you feel anxious or tempted to masturbate as a way to cope, try going for a run, lifting weights, or even just stretching for 10 minutes. See how your mood shifts afterward. Another step is mindfulness. Depression often comes from ruminating about the past, while anxiety often comes from worrying about the future. Mindfulness grounds you in the present moment. If you practice being present with your thoughts and feelings, even uncomfortable ones, you'll find that the urge to escape through compulsive behaviors lessens. Masturbation then becomes a choice, not a crutch. I also want to share something that often gets overlooked: the importance of balance, not just in behavior, but in mindset. When people ask me whether masturbation causes depression or anxiety, what they're really asking is, am I safe? Am I okay? Am I normal? And I want you to hear this from me clearly. You are not abnormal or broken because you struggle with these questions. The fact that you're curious, the fact that you're seeking knowledge, tells me that you value your health and your future. That is something to be proud of. Let's go deeper into how depression and anxiety can interact with sexual habits. Depression often brings symptoms like fatigue, low motivation, and a sense of hopelessness. Anxiety, on the other hand, can bring racing thoughts, tension, and difficulty calming down. Masturbation sometimes becomes a quick way to interrupt those feelings. For depression, it might provide a temporary sense of pleasure or distraction. For anxiety, it can release physical tension. But here's the catch. If that's the only tool you're using, it's like trying to build a house with just one hammer. It works in the moment, but it doesn't create long-term stability. This is why I encourage you to build a toolbox for your mental health. Masturbation can be in the toolbox, but it shouldn't be the only tool. Add meditation, add journaling, add physical exercise, add meaningful conversations, add hobbies that challenge and excite you. The more tools you have, the less pressure there is on any single one of them, and the less likely you are to get trapped in guilt, shame, or cycles of dependency. Another thing I want you to reflect on is energy. Many people describe feeling drained after masturbation, especially if they do it frequently. Scientifically, this has less to do with the physical act itself and more to do with mental perception and lifestyle factors. If you're already tired, stressed, or lacking sleep, masturbation may simply highlight those feelings rather than cause them. But if you believe that it's taking your energy away, your mind will interpret it that way, and your body will follow. This is what psychologists call the nocebo effect, when negative expectations actually create negative outcomes. So here's a challenge I want you to try. Instead of telling yourself, I'm weak after masturbating, try reframing it as, I just experienced release and now I can choose to recharge. Then do something proactive. Drink water, stretch, step outside for fresh air. You'll be surprised at how much of a difference mindset makes in how your body responds. Now, let's tackle something even more practical. How do you know if masturbation is negatively impacting your mental health? Here are some questions you can ask yourself. Do I feel guilty, ashamed, or anxious afterward on a regular basis? Do I use masturbation to avoid dealing with stress, sadness, or loneliness instead of addressing them directly? Is it interfering with my daily responsibilities, relationships, or goals? Do I feel like I can't control the urge even when I don't want to? If you answered yes to several of these, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It means it's worth taking a closer look at how this habit fits into your life. And it may mean you'd benefit from talking it over with a therapist, counselor, or trusted mentor who can support you without judgment. Let me pause here and remind you, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's one of the bravest things you can do. Depression and anxiety can be heavy, and you don't have to carry them alone. If you find that masturbation is tangled up in your mental health struggles, having a safe place to unpack those feelings can make all the difference. Another thing I want you to be aware of is comparison. We live in a world where people constantly compare themselves to others on social media, in friendships, in relationships. When it comes to sexual habits, this comparison can be incredibly toxic. You might think, I do it more than my friends, so I must be abnormal. Or, I do it less, so maybe something's wrong with me. The truth is, there is no single normal human sexuality exists on a spectrum. And what matters most is whether your habits are supporting your health and happiness. If you've been caught in comparison, I want you to release that pressure. Focus instead on your own body, your own emotions, your own values. What serves you may not serve someone else, and that's okay. Let's circle back to the original question. Can masturbation cause depression or anxiety? After everything we've discussed, I hope you see that the answer is not a simple yes or no. The act itself does not directly cause these conditions, but your relationship with it, the emotions, beliefs, and patterns that surround it, can absolutely influence your mental health. For some, it may play no negative role at all. For others, especially when tied to guilt or compulsion, it can be a significant factor. That's why the real solution isn't to demonize masturbation or glorify it. The solution is to create a balanced, compassionate, and intentional relationship with yourself. When you do that, masturbation becomes just one part of your life. Not the source of your depression, not the cure for your anxiety, but simply one aspect of your humanity. Before we finish, I want to leave you with a few empowering action steps you can start today. First, practice self-awareness. Each time you feel the urge to masturbate, pause and ask yourself, what emotion am I trying to manage right now? This builds mindfulness and helps you see patterns. Second, challenge guilt and shame. When negative thoughts arise, replace them with self-compassion. Remind yourself that you're human and that your worth is not defined by this one habit. Third, build healthier coping tools. Explore exercise, meditation, journaling, or creative outlets. These tools will reduce your reliance on masturbation as your primary stress relief. Fourth, prioritize connection. Depression and anxiety thrive in isolation, but they weaken when you reach out to others, build friendships, talk honestly, and create supportive relationships. And finally, seek help if you need it. There is no shame in reaching out for professional support. In fact, it could be one of the most powerful decisions you ever make for your mental health. Let me ask you this as we wrap up. How has your relationship with masturbation affected your mental health? Positively, negatively, or somewhere in between? Share your story in the comments because your honesty might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. I want to thank you for staying with me through this conversation. It takes courage to face uncomfortable questions, and the fact that you've chosen to learn, to reflect, and to grow is proof that you're stronger than you think. Remember, you are not defined by your struggles. You are not defined by guilt, shame, or fear. You are defined by your resilience, your capacity to grow, and your ability to create balance in your life. So the next time you find yourself wondering if masturbation is causing your depression or anxiety, I want you to come back to what you've learned today. The answer isn't in extremes, it's in awareness, compassion, and balance. You are capable of building a healthier relationship with yourself, and I believe in your ability to do it. Take care of yourself, keep growing, and remember, you are not alone on this journey.